I recently did a video on Cal Hubbard, the only person who is in both the Football and Baseball Hall of Fame. And a few viewers mentioned in the comments that there is also one person, only one person, in both the Football and the NASCAR Hall of Fame, and suggested I do a video. And because I am, first and foremost, a man of the people, I decided to make it happen. And the story is a fascinating one, because he made it into the Football Hall of Fame without ever playing in a game, and he made it into the NASCAR Hall of Fame without ever driving in a race. So without further ado, I give you the story of the all-time legend himself, Joe Gibbs. His early years. Mocksville is a small town in the western half of North Carolina, perhaps best known as being, at one point, the home of American frontiersman, pioneer, and notable folk hero Daniel Boone. And adding to that list of notable residents, Joe Jackson Gibbs was born there on November 25th, 1940. His childhood was fairly typical, and like a lot of kids, he enjoyed sports. He specifically liked basketball, hunting, and football, the latter of which would form the basis for a big chunk of his life's work. He ended up moving to California, and he was a good enough football player that he ended up the quarterback of his high school team, graduating in 1959 before moving on to Cerritos College, a public community college in California. His stay there was relatively brief, as he soon ended up in an undergrad program at San Diego State University. And it was during this time at San Diego State that his football career began in earnest, though not in the way you might think. His football career begins. Rather than spending his college years playing football, Joe Gibbs ended up spending his college years coaching football. He began as the offensive lineman coach in 1964 at San Diego State, before going from coaching job to coaching job at progressively larger schools with bigger football programs, namely Florida State, USC, and Arkansas. His talent was pretty obvious, and soon the NFL came calling, and he officially made the leap from college to the pros in 1973. That year, he was hired as the offensive backfield coach for the St. Louis Cardinals, who are now the Arizona Cardinals. He was hired for this gig by legendary head coach Don Coryell, who had been the coach he started with at San Diego State nearly a decade earlier and had just been hired as the head coach for the Cardinals. Gibbs spent 4 years in this role before heading for a one-year gig as offensive coordinator, his biggest job yet, with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. When his old buddy Don Coryell went to the San Diego Chargers as head coach the next year, Gibbs joined him as offensive coordinator, marking their third stint working together. During this time in San Diego, Gibbs deployed an incredibly advanced passing attack that ended up being affectionately known as Air Coryell, in tribute to the head coach. The Chargers would break multiple scoring records. They were scoring points in buckets, game after game, under Gibbs's offensive leadership. They averaged over 400 yards per game, which even in today's high-scoring NFL is a huge accomplishment, let alone back in the late 70s. And unsurprisingly, given the record-breaking offense he played a massive role in creating and leading, the next stop for Joe Gibbs was a head coaching job. It was time for him to take the helm of an entire team, and when he did, his coaching career went into overdrive. NFL head coach. At just 40 years old, Joe Gibbs was hired as the head coach of the Washington Redskins in 1981, but things did not get off to the best start. Washington lost their first 5 games under Gibbs in his first season, but team management and players never lost faith in Gibbs. They finished the year at 8-8, missing the postseason, but the second half of the year foreshadowed the greatness that was about to come. The next season, in 1982, is perhaps best remembered for being shortened by a player strike. With the season getting underway late, the schedule ended up being reduced from the usual 16 games to 9, and the playoffs were expanded from 10 teams to 16. But one person this didn't seem to bother was Joe Gibbs, who ended up capturing his first Super Bowl title in a 27-17 defeat of the Miami Dolphins. In just his second season as a head coach, he was standing on top of the football world, and for good measure, he was named NFL Coach of the Year that year as well. And so began a string of coaching success for Gibbs. He ended up with further Super Bowl wins in 1987 and 1991, and between 1981 and 1992, when he stepped down as Washington head coach, he had a record of 124 wins and just 60 losses, which would rival just about any other head coaching stretch in NFL history. He retired briefly in 1992 to take on a broadcasting role before returning to Washington for 4 more years in the early 2000s, before putting down his clipboard for good in 2007. And sandwiched right in between those stints as head coach was the honor of a lifetime. In 1996, he was enshrined in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in recognition for his incredible coaching record, as well as his pioneering approach to running an NFL offense. But you know what else he crammed into his time between NFL head coaching gigs? Perhaps the most incredible side hustle of any football coach in history: his NASCAR career. In 1991, right as he was getting ready to step down from head coaching duties, Joe Gibbs was exploring opportunities with his good friend, a guy named Don Meredith, who himself had been an NFL player. Some of you may be old enough to remember him as a player. Others may recall him as one of the original members of the Monday Night Football team. Others of you are just too young to know the guy. Sorry you missed out. Anyways, Joe Gibbs Racing was formed shortly thereafter to compete in stock car racing, best known by its largest governing body, NASCAR. After a few years, Joe Gibbs' son, JD, was named president in 1997, and the next year they began work on their team facility in Huntersville, North Carolina, which is just north of Charlotte and less than an hour's drive from Joe Gibbs' hometown of Mocksville, right where it all began. The team really began to gain momentum as the new millennium dawned. The team expanded to a two-car operation in 1999 with driver Tony Stewart's number 20 Home Depot sponsored car, and in 2000 the team won its first NASCAR Cup Series championship. This has been followed by 4 additional championship wins in 2002, 2005, 2015, and 2019. So all told, Joe Gibbs has won 3 Super Bowls and 5 NASCAR championships. Unbelievable. And Tony Stewart was just the first of many well-known drivers for the team, as they've also had Dale Jarrett, Bobby Labonte, Matt Kenseth, Carl Edwards, Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., and Kyle Busch behind the wheel at some point. Today, Joe Gibbs Racing is one of the strongest, most successful teams in NASCAR, and they show no signs of letting up. And this success, of course, has brought a fair bit of financial gain to Joe Gibbs himself. In 2020, Forbes ranked Joe Gibbs Racing as the second most valuable NASCAR team, not far behind Hendrick Motorsports and ahead of other titans like Penske Racing and Stewart-Haas Racing. Forbes determined at the time that the team was worth about $230 million. Not bad at all for the kid from Mocksville. This was enhanced in 2023 when Gibbs sold a minority stake in the team to an investment group including Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment, who also owns the NBA's Philadelphia 76ers and the NHL's New Jersey Devils. Terms were not disclosed, but I'm guessing that the old head coach did just fine. And as a capstone on his NASCAR career, he was inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame in 2020, which I'd say was well-deserved, given the extraordinary success his team has had over more than 3 decades in the sport. And with this induction, he became the only person in both the Pro Football Hall of Fame as well as the NASCAR Hall of Fame. And honestly, I'm guessing it will be just him for some time to come. That's it for today's video, folks. Thanks a ton for watching. Let me know what you think of the extraordinary life of Joe Gibbs in the comments below. And if you've got any other ideas for video topics, let's have them. See you next time, friends.